we are, ladies and gentlemen, driving along on a friendly trip with the lovely Vanessa and the uber intelligent Chris and the playful Bonnie. And we are heading up to Summer Haven in the mountains because Tucson, even though it's late, only mid-April, is already starting to heat up. Besides, there's going to be birds, and there's going to be trees, and there's going to be rocks, all kinds of stuff that's very interesting to people who love the planet. Anyway, let's terminate. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are standing at the dog overlook along the route to Summer Haven in the Santa Catalina Mountains. I'm sweeping the horizon to the distance. Try to give you an idea of some of the mountains, some of which are referred to as sky islands here in the region of Tucson, Arizona. We have an expert who knows this region well, and he himself is making sure he doesn't screw anything up when we ask him questions by consulting the local geological marquees. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce...
There's just a bunch of disinformation about ecology, which you shouldn't believe.
Disinformation. Could you, I'd like to talk more about ecological disinformation in a moment, but Dr. Christopher Earle is now going to give us a thumbnail sketch of the mountains that we can see to in the direction of...
You see this mountain?
This mountain.
This is the Santa Catalina Mountains.
Ooh, Santa Catalina. Wow.
Going counterclockwise, there is a reddish mountain range in the distance, and that is the Tucson Mountains. Going counterclockwise a little farther, there's a mountain in the far distance. It's a long ridge. It's got a sharp point on the left end. It's got a flat top mountain with some white buildings on top of it on the right end. And that is the Babaquivari Mountains and Kit Peak, featuring the Kit Peak Observatory.
That's kind of obscured, isn't it?
Going from the peak of Babaquivari farther to the left, there's a low, nondescript mountain range that still forms the part of the horizon. That's described as the Sierrita Mountains.
Sierra or Sierra?
Sierrita.
Sierrita, it's not the
Little Sierra.
Ah.
Going farther left from there, in the very far distance, which may even be rather hard to see with video, is the Tumacacari Mountains.
And they are located in?
Those are actually quite close to the border. I think they're partly in the U.S. and partly in Mexico.
Okay. Going
farther left is a very large mountain range. That is Santa Rita's. The top of it, Mount Wrightson at 9,500 feet, is one of the tallest peaks in southern Arizona.
Is that the peak on the left or the peak on the right?
That's the one in the middle.
Okay, there's one, okay, because I can see, okay, I got the one in the middle, I believe.
And the peak just to the right of it, that's a little bit lower, is Mount Hopkins, which has the multiple mirror telescope on top of it.
Okay.
And then over here...
That would be the Whipple Observatory, correct?
Maybe.
Yeah, I think so.
And then moving a little farther left, we have a mountain range that has the upper slopes dark with conifers. Those are the Rincon Mountains.
Now, because the Rincons are crowned with conifers, the locals refer to them as what?
Are you getting me to say Sky Island?
Sky Island. Sky Island. Now.
Sky Island is actually, it's sort of a fashionable Arizona term to refer to what is really the dominant geomorphic expression of the central Cordillera from here south for about 1,000 miles, which is here. It develops into the Sierra Madre Occidental once you get a few hundred miles farther south, but even in the Sierra Madre Occidental, it's basically discrete mountain ranges that are fairly high elevation. You get summit elevations in the range of like 7,000 to 11,000 feet, and high enough to support coniferous forests, and therefore high enough to support a significant amount of rainfall, and therefore people can get enough water to farm, which is why these areas have always been very important to people. It's the main reason that nobody lives out there in the desert, is that there's no water. All the water that's associated with this landscape is coming ultimately derived from precipitation off the slopes of the mountains.
So we do occasionally have rainfall, for instance, in Tucson, but it doesn't accumulate enough. There's not enough rainfall to actually support any kind of intensive agriculture, right?
Tucson gets well under 10 inches a year,
Okay.
which is far too little to support agriculture unless you have artificial supplementation, which in Tucson they've done primarily first by mining groundwater until it got to the point where there wasn't any left, and secondarily by taking water out of the Colorado River hundreds of miles away. But the top of Mount Lemmon gets, I believe, over 20 inches of rain a year.
That's the highest peak here
The highest
in the
peak
Santa
in the
Catalinas.
Catalinas, yeah. Gets over 20 inches a year, so you do have perennial water coming out of the range, for instance, in Sabino Canyon, which supported resources like oak woodlands, which would provide a food source for the native peoples that lived here, and so they would harvest the acorns.
What do you think the population density was indigenously in this area in the past? 10 people a square
I'm not gonna
mile?
speculate.
I will. I'd say it was 11.257 people per square mile.
I think it was more than that.
You
It
really?
was quite heavily populated. There's no problem getting enough food out of the Sonoran Desert. The thing is that humans, unlike most of the animals that live here, actually need liquid water to sustain themselves. And so all the human populations would be located near wells and tanks and perennial streams.
So the Sabino riparian corridor would have been a very highly populated region, and there would be areas, expansive areas, where no one was at all.
Well, you also
except
have
for,
to understand that Euro-American settlement pretty much destroyed this landscape.
So we're not seeing it the way it was.
When white settlers first arrived in this area, there were beaver dams running all up and down the Santa Clara River.
And the Santa Clara is located,
It's the main river that runs through the heart of Tucson.
not the Riedo. That's not the main river.
No,
That's
the
north
Rio is a
Tucson.
little thing that runs across the side here.
And
But
is that a dry?
It also was a perennial stream that had beaver living in it.
Wow.
You know, as did Tanca Verde and all these others. The area in between had much of it had dense grasslands, and people came here and they killed all the beaver and they ran cattle over the land until nothing was left that a cow couldn't eat.
Now, why would people do such a thing?
Well, it was profitable for a while.
Profitable.
Yeah.
Okay, so it wasn't just a matter of survival.
Oh no.
Okay, so it had to do with capital investment.
People did not leave the eastern United States and come to Tucson to survive. They came here to make a lot of money.
What about the mining interests in the area as well? I imagine.
Yeah, then mining happened. Mining happened later. Mining, of course, in this area is almost entirely copper mining, and it's relatively low-grade copper. So exploitation of those resources had to wait until we had sophisticated machines.
But it also sounds like vast areas of land would have had to have been extracted from in order to get enough of the high-quality copper to make it profitable. Is that true?
Well, it depends on what you call a vast area. I mean, it's a pretty big landscape. The Green Valley Mine, which you can see from here, occupies maybe 2 degrees of your field of view from here, in spite of the fact that that mine covers several thousand acres.
Wow. Now, you mentioned something about the...
So what's vast? Is several thousand acres vast, or is several million acres vast?
So you had some exceptions when you were talking about the Marquis, when you reviewed it. What were those exceptions in terms of the ecological...
Oh, their ecology?
Yeah.
They say that traveling north from here to Alberta is equivalent to traveling upward from here to the top of Mount Lennon, which is an idea that was discredited in ecology before 1920.
Now, I have been up near Lemon, and what I found was it was a lot like the Sierra in California. It seemed very Sierra-esque.
I would be surprised if you found that it resembled Banff, Alberta, which is what the placard over there says.
Oh, I see. Okay. So this area does not have this vertical variation in domain that, for instance, Mauna Kea would on Hawaii, going up from the beach to the top of the observatory there.
You mean it's not as high?
No, it doesn't have as much variation.
It's not as high.
Okay, if it had been higher, it would have as much
What kind of
variation.
variation do you want?
Well, they say there's like 4 or 5 different ecological domains on Mauna Kea from the beach all the way up to the top of the mountain. But anyway.
Well, an ecological domain is kind of hard to define.
Or a strata, if you wish.
I mean, here we can say here that we have desert scrub, and we have
Desert scrub.
conifer woodland, and we have
Conifer
closed
wood.
canopy conifer, which we get into up in the upper
So
part of
basically the
mountain.
sunlight doesn't penetrate
Yeah.
there.
And then we have wet cold conifer, which you get up into at the very, very top of the mountain on the north-facing slopes,
Okay.
where you'll find like white fir. And And then we have riparian forest that you'll find like in the upper parts of Sabino Canyon. And then we have like lower riparian, hot desert riparian, which you'll find in the lower part of Sabino Canyon.
So if the Earth as a whole had like 10, I'll make up an arbitrary number, 10 different strata or domains for environments, how many of those would be in this region? 4 or 5?
1 or 2.
1 or 2.
Yeah.
Okay, 1 or 2. Wow.
Probably 2.
2. I would think 2. If it had 1, then it'd all be the same.
But the second would be a pinpoint. It would
just the peaks of
just be the highest part of the Catalinas and the highest part of the
So
range.
basically it's a graduated change in the environment until you get to the, what did you call it, the part where the canopy is in the north face?
Pretty much everything that we're going to see on the Catalinas today is either semi-arid or arid. And it all has pretty much the same seasonal precipitation regime.
Okay, so that pretty much covers it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Doctor, for this wonderful explanation of things that we see but we rarely cognize.
Vanessa's going to share the name of the mountain.
Oh, the Bad Dog Mountain.
The name of the mountain is Frog Mountain.
Babadawag
Babadawag.
is Tohono
Oh,
for
it doesn't
Frog
mean
Mountain.
bad dog. What is Badad?
Frog.
Frog
Bad Dog means
Mountain.
Frog Mountain.
And
Well,
roughly, and the word Tucson also comes from Tohono O'odham language. It roughly translates to at the foot of the Black Hill.
And what's the Black Hill, I wonder?
Question. Anyway, that's what Tucson.
Well, thank you, Vanessa, for sharing that off the marquee with us. You want to say anything about this area, Chris?
Oh, I don't know.
I mean, this is the lifeblood of the area. You were talking earlier about the fact that the area is dependent upon the flow off the mountains.
Here we are in the upper portion of the Sonoran Desert Life Zone. You will notice that there is a great deal of exposed rock in this area. Now, one of the consequences of all this exposed rock is that it magnifies the rainfall. The water flows off the rock and into these relatively small areas of soil.
So it collects.
So you have, in a given, in our view shed here, you might be able to see 3 or 4 acres of land, of which only about 2 acres has soil and plants growing on it. So that 2 acres is realizing the benefits of the precipitation that fell on the whole 4 acres. This is one of the reasons why when you get up into rocky areas in the desert, the plant life becomes more abundant and more lush. And also, because of the fact that it's a broken rocky area, a lot of these roots penetrate very deep into the rock, and that effectively reduces the drought stress that's associated with it. Also, of course, we're standing in a canyon here, and so this is essentially a riparian area. Not nearly as dry as, say, that hillside in the background, where you have deeply fractured rock, not so much exposed rock, and no proximity to riparian areas. It reduces the access to precipitation. Basically, most of the pattern that you can see of living things in the desert is controlled by their access to water. It's actually a very simple ecology.
Now, the actual water that is collected here or flows through here comes off of the glacial melt, a melt in the higher elevations?
No.
Just a snowpack melt, or
No, this what you see here is growing mostly on rain that fell right here.
right here? And it'll rain here more likely because it's higher at elevations, and
There
there.
is an upstream watershed,
Okay.
but we're in Molino Basin, and if you look at the topo map, you'll discover that almost all of Molino Basin is at a fairly low elevation. Little of this basin reaches up into the conifer zone. So these plants are basically living on water that fell out of the sky right here,
Okay.
and on dew.
Vanessa, you're saying there's water down below? I mean, not Vanessa, Bonnie?
You have to speak in more than monosyllables.
Could you describe the water? Is it composed of H2O with dissolved sediments? There you go.
Start a fire.
Is that a cavern? A cave? I'm sure some anthropologist thousands of years from now will be trying to interpret the lusts of youthful Homo sapiens based on those cave paintings.
Well, this rock has a lot of large plagioclase crystals in it.
What does that mean?
Well, basically, what happened was that this was all deep in the earth about 180 million years ago, and it was subjected to a lot of compressive stress and a lot of shear stress, sort of being squished around like a layer cake.
So it was rolled. It was rolled like dough to some degree.
And there were bodies of granite being injected in depth into this this pile of old rock. And granite actually has a fairly low melting point as rocks go. Some of the constituents of granite become liquid at temperatures as low as 550 degrees Celsius.
It's almost like a salt.
Whereas with salt, it's like twice that temperature.
Okay.
And the lowest melting point portions of the granite are the parts that remain liquid longest when the body is cooling, logically. And they tend to float because they're also low density. Low density and low melting point kind of go together with rocks. And that consists primarily of plagioclase. So it's kind of like the foam on top of the milkshake, and it gets squeezed up into the rocks above along fissures and cracks by the pressure of the granite.
Are there lots of little tiny air pockets in this rock?
No.
No?
No.
It's just
more like fracking.
It's just...
It's fracking by the granite.
Huh.
Except instead of just injecting water, although water was a significant part of it, it's also injecting other things like liquid silica.
Okay. So it's basically the substance that's lighter that melts at a lower temperature, retains its liquidity longer, and then it also happens to be able to float because its specific gravity is lighter than the rest of the stone.
And it's also lighter in color.
And, so of course,
appropriate, yeah.
Yeah, so it corresponds to that. So wherever we walk around and we see this spackling of white on stones, that was actually the substance that remained fluid long enough to rise to the top.
Yeah.
Fabulous. Thank you.
So this tells us that geologically, regardless of where we are in the modern topography, where we were when this rock formed was on top of a granite chamber.
Now I'm noticing something about you, Chris. You are not you're a specialist in pine trees, but you seem to have a lot of detailed knowledge about a vast array of other natural phenomena, correct?
I'm a specialist in nature.
Specialist in nature. That's almost a bit of a conundrum, isn't it? Specialist.
On my tax return, I usually put natural philosopher.
That's what we used. That was what existed before there were scientists.
Yeah.
Well, thank you once again for dropping those pearls of wisdom in our general direction.
I regard scientists as a form of businessman.
And what trading in facts, perhaps?
Trading in whatever they can get people to write them a grant for.
Grant writing is perhaps one of the most sought-after skills as a research scientist.
A scientist that can't find funding isn't a scientist anymore.
But you're doing this not for funding. You're doing it for...
What? I don't get paid?
Fun!
Oh, okay.
You gotta drop the D, dude.
Oh.
We're looking over the shoulders of the natural philosopher, Christopher Earle, as he sweeps the environment, trying to get oriented. So, he's got something. He's on the trail. All right.
Okay. So this is mostly a forest of Arizona pine. And it's got at least some Chihuahua pine. That tall one with the rounded top on it is a Chihuahua pine.
Yeah, with a cloud above it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this really big one with the orange bark in the back.
Okay.
There's a couple more of them around. Those are ponderosa pine. There goes a raven.
Ah, yes.
And then down here close to the water we have, well, that actually is an alligator bark juniper. Want to guess why they call it alligator bark juniper?
Well, I would suspect it has something to do with the bark, and there's something about juniper. What makes a juniper? Is it like the way that we would call them leaves? We couldn't call them fronds. What are they? Needles.
Needles.
Needles. Is that something? How you identify that as a juniper?
Yeah, and it has berries.
Okay.
They're actually cones, but they look like berries, and people call them berries and make gin out of them.
Huh.
And actually, like all members of the Cypress family, it doesn't drop leaves.
Wait a second. A juniper is a member of the Cypress family?
Yeah.
Okay, so cypresses are a subset of firs and pines, or what?
Cypresses.
Give us just a sense of the overall relationship. If we refer, most people would just say a pine tree. How would you distinguish that from a fir tree?
It has pine cones.
So that's the big difference between a pine and a fir. What does a fir tree have?
A fir tree has fir cones.
Fir cones.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's the cones which
Yep.
hold the embryos for the next generation that determine whether it's a pine or a fir. Now, you said this is a fir?
Cones on these look like little berries.
Ah, okay. Now, you said it was a juniper, but a juniper is a subclass of a cypress, and a cypress is a subclass of a fir by inference because it has the little berry-looking things on it, right?
No,
No?
cypress is
It's a class of
not
fir.
really a subclass of anything. It's a class of its own.
Is it really?
Yes.
Okay, what is it? Would you group it with? Does it have a hard seed, or does it have like
It's a conifer.
It is a conifer. Okay, so conifers.
subclass of conifer.
The top level is conifer, and there's firs, pines,
No,
and
above conifers you have like vascular plants.
okay. Then you have
Seed
something
plants.
called life.
Conifers are seed plants.
Seed
Yes.
plants.
And above seed plants you have vascular plants.
Vascular plants. So they're
Above
vascular. They're
vascular plants you have plants.
plants. Okay, good. I got this. So you got
Above
plants.
plants you have living things.
Okay, well, you're just boggling my mind with abstractions. Look at that. Zoom in. Notice the adept use of the thumb in order to navigate the keypad.
All right.
We got a
now,
leafy
still gotta
tree
see if
here.
we have some cypresses here. We should have some cypresses here. This is a good place. Right, you see that? That's a dead Chihuahua pine.
I see it, because
See
it's got a
how little
rounded
cones
top.
on it?
Okay.
You see how little the cones are?
All right, let me go right up to the top and let's see if we can zoom in on the little tiny cones. Ah, yes.
And see how those cones are there? They haven't fallen off. They're
No.
still in the tree.
Yes.
That is what tells you right away that it's a Chihuahua pine.
Chihuahua pine.
The only one of your local pines that holds on to its cones for a long time.
It's like, like a parent that clings to its children.
Maybe.
Do the seed fall out of the cones
Yeah,
and the cones?
seeds fall out.
Okay, that's good. I figured that one out for myself. I'm a budding natural
More
philosopher.
like a parent that clings to its children's old shoes.
Who have already left. Yes. Okay, so along this riparian corridor, we're seeing leafy plants, but you have yet to identify them for me. Are there limits to your knowledge of things plant?
Oh, there's a bird. Yes.
Okay.
Now this might be a cypress. Nope, it's a juniper.
Juniper, another juniper.
Oh, we haven't got to the cypresses yet here.
Okay, there's another tall tree with a rounded top. Would that be, ladies and gentlemen, test yourself. I'm going to zoom in. Does it cling to its children's shoes? Let's get back to the expert who is quickly running away because he has realized the deficiencies of his student. He's still on the quest for cypress, convinced that they must be present. Are we about to depart?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, we're about
Oh,
to
this cool breeze feels so
get on a
good.
plane.
Doesn't it?
Watch the car. Well, this is a boy pine discolor. This is one of the rarest pinion pines in North America. It's called discolor because it's this weird color. And see? See how those leaves are dark green on one side and white on the other?
Huh.
See, you won't see another pinion pine in North America that looks like that.
So it conserves its chlorophyll on one side of the...
And it's dioecious, just like you and me.
Dioecious?
The whole plant is either male or female.
Oh.
So how can you tell this is male?
It doesn't have any cones on it. And it doesn't have any cones under it, so it hasn't had any cones ever.
It has no cone because it has huevos.
They don't lay eggs.
They don't lay eggs.
No.
The bush behind it, however, what is that?
The bush behind it. Oh, that's some oak. Scrubby oak.
Now, are there natural associative relationships between different trees?
We're going this way.
Hey, there's an evasion of a question. I think that was a White House press interrogator.
Oh, look, a weed.
Okay, we're going to go this way until we get somewhere. I'm shutting down.
Yeah, I can just like snake.
So what do we say?
Off go Jeff and Chris to explore.
Well, this looks like it has color on different sides. So therefore, if I remember correctly, it's a pinion pine? Is that what you said?
Hundreds. Or the 1400s. And it hasn't eroded.
It's over there.
Look at that mushroom rock over there. Wow. Or it could be, we could call it Mario Brothers.
Actually, dioeciousness is fairly uncommon in trees.
And once again, we are not finding a female. Why would there be so many males without there being females? Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to quiz you.
Needles in groups of 3.
Groups of 3. So we could, it's very Trinitarian.
Tripartite.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have found a female pinion pine.
The remnant of an old aborted cone.
So when would that cone have
A
erupted?
bunch of baby new cones. See? These are all new cones. These are going to grow into cones this year.
So they're not highly procreative, are they? In this particular location.
I don't know. I read one account that said they produce a cone crop about every 6 years. That's very sparse.
Yes. We found our female, by the way, folks. You can see some incipient cones right there.
Let's see, if we put these two together.
Will they procreate and the cones spring forth right here? There's quite a difference in the...
Yes, he is longer.
Is this how it conserves its resources? Look, the needles are much more robust on the male than on the female. Do they take some of the resources and turn them into cones?
This grows on a better site, that's all. Each of those whorls of needles represents a year's growth.
Okay, so 1 year, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years of growth.
So that one was grown on a pretty bad site. This one, remember what I told you about rocks and water?
Yeah, it's trapping a lot of water in the underlayer, so this plant can grow.
Relatively good site.
Oh, and these are white on the inside too. Green on the outside.
Oh, now this is interesting.
Now these plants are not conifers, and I'll tell you why. Because it's got a bloom on it, so therefore it's going to be a gymnosperm, correct? It's going to have a seed nut that encapsulates angiosperm, right?
Ovary.
It'll have an ovary and a nut
It already has an ovary.
around the seed, as opposed to an exposed embryo, as we might see in the juniper.
What about blue glaucus and what is green? Yep. That's the same
Isn't that
one.
amazing?
They just do that.
No, it's
Glaucus?
Bluish.
Bluish.
Oh, bluish. And then,
There's a dead tree stump here. Can you determine what it is?
yeah, it's Juniper stepiana.
It is a juniper.
Yeah.
And they get that large. How long do you think that one? How long do you think it lived?
How long did it live?
And how long ago did it die? What's your
What we do is
estimate?
we count its little rings.
Oh.
It produces one little ring every year.
So you can kind of sort of see the rings right here.
Kind of sort of.
But that's for the branch, right?
See? Well, sort of. So, there's not a whole lot of rings there.
So maybe 100 years, Matt?
It might have been 100, 150 years
And how long ago would it have died, do you think?
Well, it probably has something to do with that saw cut and that saw cut. And I would say that you would find that this tree died not too many years after they first built an overlook at Windy Point.
Now another question. Do trees naturally go into an old age and die, or do they die simply because of environmental conditions?
Yeah, trees don't die, things kill them.
So no tree ever dies of old age?
No.
Well, wish we were more like, no, I'm glad to die. Getting old, it feels so,
Do you know any humans who haven't been killed by something?
other than old age.
Well, what is old age? Define to me the characteristics of old age.
Everything slows down and gets more and more miserable until you abandon the body. So basically, that's not dying of old age, that's just abandoning an otherwise worthless form, right?
Maybe.
Most people die because they get something.
Some illness, but I think, yeah.
Most people die of a disease. Same way with trees.
So if you don't disease, you won't die.
Okay. Trees are like coral. Okay, they consist of a living skeleton over a dead skeleton. Okay? The oldest tree in the world, or I should say the oldest living cell in any tree in the world, is not more than 100 years old. Maybe 150. Data are a little sketchy to make it precise. But then the cell dies, and what's left behind is something dead that's called wood.
And something new grows, a new growth in the tree.
So if you show me a 4,000-year-old tree, the tree may be 4,000 years old in the narrow sense that there was a living thing with essentially the same genetic makeup growing on that spot 4,000 years ago. But it looks completely different than what it was 4,000 years ago, and none of the cells are left over from 4,000 years ago. So how do you define how old a thing
So really,
is?
it's generational. Every tree is generational.
Really, it's a question of how you define age.
Now in us,
Maybe
the oldest.
a little word, but it has a very complicated definition.
Do you happen to know what the oldest living cells are in us?
As old as you are.
So there are cells that, in a woman, for instance, she has eggs in her ovum that are up until she goes into menopause that were given to her before birth.
Yeah.
That's part of her endowment. So those would be 40 years old, let's say.
Yeah.
What about in a male?
In the male,
In the male.
essentially all of your brain cells were with you when you were born.
No kidding.
Yeah.
So that's really the longest lived cells in the human body, are the brain cells. And those of us who don't have any left were...
Well, there are other cells. Heart cells live a long time. Pretty much everything in the nervous system lives a long time. Human
Fabulous.
cells vary greatly in age.
So we are not generational like a tree is, because we do have cells that have been with us since our birth.
Also, unlike trees, we get senile.
And trees?
Well, because trees don't have any continuity.
Carpenter bees. I got it.
Hello,
Hello, sweeties.
Hello.
Carpenter bees. They're like little hummingbirds.
See how friendly they are?
They are, and they're flying in formation.
Curious.
Wow. Do you know anything about these
No,
bees?
not really.
Those look like beetles.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we do know about these bees. They're black, they fly like hummingbirds, and they're not birds, they're bees. So, thank you for allowing me to hold forth on this topic. They're called carpenter bees.
I don't know what that grass is.
You said it was like your grass, but it's not.
Oh, okay.
What, are you talking about the yucca?
Is there any more to be said about senescence in living things that you would like to share?
Well, just that the reason that humans become senescent is because we have organ systems. The tree does not, okay? The tree may be very big, but everything you need to make another one of these trees is present in that, okay? That. You dip that in rooting hormone, stick it in the soil, and pretty soon you'll have a new pinion pine. That's not a complicated system.
No. Dip us in hormone solution and we drown. Hey, Chris.
What?
I mean, why'd you bring us here?
Have a good one.
So you can have a nice walk in the woods.
Walk in the woods. I heard talk that we really came up to these mountains to see a certain kind of tree. I can't quite remember what it was.
There might be some Arizona cypresses up here.
Arizona cypresses. We are on the quest for Arizona cypress.
It's not impossible that there will be one up there.
The classic valley bottom forest of the Santa Catalina Mountains, elevation circa 6,000 feet. And it has a white-breasted nuthatch.
Come on, baby.
You can almost see it with the naked eye.
I love those nuthatches.
They can walk downhill in the trees. It's so cool.
I see them flitting about.
And they'll eat the
I'm
little
getting,
bugs in the
oh,
trees
you're
and there's
right.
little holes.
They're better than cats. Cats can't do that.
Cats won't
That
walk
hedge is
downhill in
rule.
trees.
Let's see. Where's Google?
Yeah.
Maps, those uses.
We should
There
walk
we
around
go.
our neighborhood. We have so many species of birds and go through that the desert patch across the street.
This time of year, or this time of the day, it might be rough, but
Where are you going now? Oh, he just flitted away.
There we go.
Time we get
I
home,
had
it'll be
this
fine.
where Chris didn't that hedge.
yeah.
This is a bad year.
Why?
Bad year because it hardly snowed or rained at all last winter. So the summer drought is going to set on early. It's going to last for a long time. So the main objective of the trees is just going to be to survive this year. They're not going to thrive.
Okay.
Unless they get a really good monsoon season.
And the probability of that is like you look in the Farmer's Almanac and you might get a sense of that, right?
Well, traditionally the probability of that would be based upon looking at the historical record. And if there's one thing we've learned in the last 10 or 15 years, that doesn't work very well.
So what's thrown the historical record off, would you say?
Anthropogenic climate change.
Anthropogenic. Oh no, you clearly come down on the side of global climate shift warming. Look, do you imagine that? A scientist who comes down on the side of global warming.
And I said, El Nino? I think El Nino.
As he disappears into the bush.
Isn't that right?
Not a very original position, Chris. Here we have water in the liquid state, and that water happens to be right up front and visible. Imagine that. And of course, a few yards away, there is no water. And by reasoning, we would say that this is not what we would call flowing water. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we've been on the quest to find cypress trees here in the Santa Catalina Mountains. We found a variety of other trees, because all you got to do is look around. If you're like me and you look around and you see a bunch of trees, you say, oh, that's some kind of a pine tree. And oh yes, that's some kind of oak tree. But that pretty much exhausts your tree recognition faculties. But fortunately for us, we have at least one expert on these trees with us here. And he believes, with some assurity, that we have discovered the vaunted holy grail of our trip into the Santa Catalina Mountains, the cypress. Now, I want to ask you, we've been looking
Way too much background noise for this. You see, you got to get down away from the road to where it's quieter.
we're being encouraged to hike down this way to conduct our interview. Okay, Chris,
We don't find an easy way down. That's what we have to do. That's
we
our
are
job.
looking for a way down, and hopefully not one that ends in the same kind of result as the car we saw at the bottom.
That must have predated
Of the corridor.
construction of the guardrail. Well, this is way down. I see it. It's a little bit precipitous.
I've made a descent. Chris has been ejaculating with some excitement about discoveries down below in the water course area. That's where I came from. There's a lot of detritus here, a lot of slidey stones. You can see the water in front of you. I'm doing the best I can to optimize between saving my own butt and the camera. There is a pool. Yep, there's a round stone. Okay. As you can see, I'm a little unstable here. I have to make a hop. Okay. Down to the corridor in the canyon. Making progress. Other people have obviously been down here before. Haven't made wise choices as to how to get rid of their waste. You can hear the tickle of water flowing down from under the stone, trickling down from above. Very sweet sound. I guess this YouTube video would only be successful if I were to make a slip and a fall and a dunk. Okay, Chris.
Hello.
What have you discovered in my absence?
Giant columbines.
What are columbines?
They are a really pretty flower.
Up. I'm going to have to get much closer for that. Here we go. Chris has discovered some beautiful yellow flowers down here. A profusion of them. Very star-esque. Whoops. That was not me, obviously. They're pure. They really are pretty. They're not flamboyant. They're subtly flamboyant flowers with little trills coming off them, which must be their pistils or stamens or something along those lines.
Like little spaceships.
Yeah. This one's making a little bit of a constellation. I see a bar coming off to the side and in a central area. Columbines. And if we look over here, Chris is going to point out a few things. Go ahead, Chris.
Oh, really?
Well, what's that tree?
White alder
That's
down here.
a what?
This is the white alder.
White alder. That's one of the first growing trees during
White alder, yeah, they grow very well.
restoration of a habitat, right?
Well, white alders have the ability to take nitrogen out of the atmosphere and put it into the soil.
Ooh, they're like a legume then or something.
So they like fertilize the soil. So
Fabulous.
They're a very good pioneer species.
Ah,
And then we have the sycamores, which are these big trees, big hardwood trees behind me here.
okay,
We
I'm
have
scanning them.
cypresses, like this one here, and that. Well, that one's a good example.
That's a cypress right there.
Yes.
Cypress, and it's sent up into the canopy.
And there's that oak right in front of you. There's always oaks.
This is an oak.
Yeah.
Okay, and they usually have the serrated leaf edge. Most oaks.
They vary. Some of them have smooth entire leaves, some of them have lobed leaves, some of them have toothed leaves.
Are they an old variety?
You get the same thing in the same plant. That same plant has smooth leafed ones.
Are they an old variety of deciduous tree?
Yeah.
They go
Oh,
back.
no, these are evergreen oaks.
Evergreen oaks, which means they don't lose their leaves.
Oh, they do eventually.
I notice it's very thick.
They lose them. They lose some of their leaves every year, probably in response to the summer drought, primarily. And behind you are a bunch of cypress seedlings.
This is a cypress. Oh yeah, I can tell by the structure of the.
Or saplings, I should say.
Look at that. Not highly dense with photosynthesis leaf sites. And that right there, this right behind me.
That dead thing?
Yeah, but it does have some growth at the top.
Oh, it's growing next to an oak.
Yeah, that's the oak. Okay. Wow.
And this thing is a really big sedge.
So it's a grass.
Yeah, well, it's a sedge.
Okay.
Related to grass. But most of the sedges you'll see in Arizona are like 6 inches tall. This one's 3.5 feet.
And that's because it has plenty of water and nutrients and sunshine, apparently.
Yes. I'm standing next to a flowing stream.
Which trickles nicely in the background. There we go, a cypress right behind us. Yeah, 75 to 100 feet up. Probably 2 foot in diameter. Branches at virtually all levels. Lots of bare wood exposed, easily visible limbs because of the lack of density to the needles. Honeybees.
We may hope not.
Looks like Chris has identified Yeah, they are definitely buzzing about. We can see them entering and exiting through a cavity in the sycamore.
Killer bees are all over Arizona now, especially places like this.
Well,
So we want to gently back away without inciting too much in the way of activity on their part.
this would be a good time to head back.
I think so. Yeah, we are ascending back up to the road. Even at 6,000 feet is a bit of a toll. Blood oxygen supply. We are very happy that we did not excite the Africanized honeybees. And that we weren't having to scramble up this rock side. I'm wondering if cypresses are sexual or
Come on over
differentiated or...
here. You gotta take a close-up picture.
Oh, the man taking a close-up picture? What are you seeing in there?
Monoecious plants are plants that have both male and female parts on the same plant.
Oh, I see the buds coming off the tips.
And you see these?
Hold on, let me get find your hand.
See that?
I have to find your hand first.
It's on the end of my arm.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, what is that?
That is a cone.
Huh,
That is a cypress cone.
Oh,
wow.
And here is a younger cypress cone. This is probably a mature cone from last year. This is a cone that's maturing this year. And then, this is where you have to be close. See these little brown tips on the branches?
I can get close. I can get in focus is the question. Yeah, little brown tips. Okay.
Those are pollen cones.
Oh, that's the male.
Yeah.
So the large ones are the females.
And then, you see this?
Coming in.
his hanging balls.
And it's an open cone. That's an old cone that opened years ago and lost all of its seeds.
Wow. So their cones are basically balls, not cones.
And if you take this
How do
cone
they fertilize? How do you know?
and open it,
Using the prescribed method.
you will see that it's full of little seeds. See the little brown seeds? There's probably about 20 or 30 of them in there.
I see them, yeah. Clearly.
Cypress tree.
I
How
should
old
take a
do you
picture of
think
them
this tree is?
myself. So I have no idea.
Any guesses?
You know what I want to do? I want to back up. I get hit by a car. Go into the shade. Oh, that's a lovely cypress tree. It's almost circular. Wow. That is one very full cypress.
Why don't you take a picture of the starting from the root?
The bees think you're one big flower.
That's what's in here in the water bottle.
Conclude our adventure into the Santa Catalinas. We see our heroes, Chris and Bonnie, perambulating off into the distance on the quest for the next most interesting observation.